On April 3, 2009, a man walked into the American Civic Association Immigration Center in Binghamton, New York, and began shooting everyone in an English as a second language class. 15 of the 17 people shot were immigrants to the U.S., so many would assume the assailant was some sort of national extremist who wanted to rid the country of immigrants, but that wasn't the case. After arriving on the scene and sorting out everyone's identities, it would turn out that the shooter was an immigrant himself. This is Monsters. Jiverly Wong was born Lin Phat Vuong on December 8, 1967 in South Vietnam. His family, which included him, his parents, and 3 siblings, was of Chinese descent. Around the time of Jiverly's birth, his father, Henry, would have been an officer in the South Vietnamese Army and was fighting the war, working with the United States Air Force. Once the war was over, Henry had a fondness for the U.S., and in 1990, when Jiverly was 22 years old, the family immigrated to the States. They settled in the city of Binghamton in upstate New York, and Henry became a well-known figure in the Vietnamese community. He volunteered at the church and worked as a translator for people immigrating to the U.S. Unfortunately, Jiverly didn't find what he needed in the city, and he set off for greener grass on the other side of the country. He had been in Southern California for less than a year when he was arrested for the first time, but the details of that arrest aren't well known. The following year, he was arrested and charged with passing bad checks. Jiverly never seemed to create a stable life for himself. He went back and forth between the Los Angeles area and Binghamton over the years. During that time, he had a number of run-ins with the law, not always because he was breaking it. He was involved in a minor car accident in California. He reported that someone had tried to break into his apartment in New York. Police checked the place out but found no signs of a break-in. That may have been another indicator of Jiverly's growing paranoia. In 1990, not long after they had arrived in the States, his father said that Jiverly told him that someone was trying to kill him. He said, quote, "They're in front of me and trying to capture me," but he was pointing at nothing in front of him. Henry took his son to the hospital, but they determined that nothing was wrong with him and sent them home. Henry would later say that his English was poor back then, and he doesn't think they fully understood what the problem was. Despite his minor criminal record, Jiverly was able to become a naturalized U.S. citizen in 1995. It's reported that he left the U.S. shortly after that, but I couldn't find any information about where he went. There are also a few details about his life that happened during that time inside of the U.S. In June of 1997, Jiverly was granted a license for a handgun in the state of New York. Around that time, a clerk at a Walmart store said he would regularly come in to purchase ammunition and targets. He also joined 2 shooting ranges in upstate New York around that time. From 1995 to 2000, it's unclear where Jiverly lived, but in 2000 he moved into an apartment in Inglewood, California in the Los Angeles area. That would be the longest he lived in one place after arriving in the U.S. He lived there for 7 years and worked as a delivery driver for a sushi company. He wasn't delivering to people's homes, though. He delivered larger quantities to grocery stores as well as hospital and university cafeterias. His neighbors said he was quiet outside of an occasional hello. He had struggled to learn English after he immigrated, which likely kept him isolated from the people around him. One odd thing about Jiverly that was realized later was that he had actually gotten married on December 23, 1999 to a woman named Zhu Peng Zhang. He kept the marriage a complete secret from his family as well as his neighbors. When asked about it later, neighbors in the building said they saw him with multiple women in the time he lived there. He and his wife separated in 2005 and were officially divorced on July 21, 2006. Details about her are also unknown. Maybe his neighbors saw her and then other women after she had moved out in 2005. It's possible. One of the residents said that uniformed police were constantly watching the apartment building, but not because of Jiverly. There was a lot of drug activity there and they were trying to stop that, but it's possible that Jiverly's paranoia caused him to think they were watching him. A housekeeper that worked in the building said that FBI agents had stopped by multiple times asking about Jiverly, but when the FBI was asked later, they said they had never had an investigation into him. Like they'd tell us if they did though, right? In September of 2007, Jiverly stopped showing up for work at the sushi company and it turned out that he had packed up and moved back to New York. He moved in with his parents who lived in Johnson City just outside of Binghamton. He began working at a Shop Vac brand vacuum factory nearby and spent his free time at the shooting range. He told a man at the range that he had shot about 10,000 rounds over the course of a year. In 2008, the Shop Vac factory closed and Jiverly started receiving trade adjustment assistance, which is a type of federal aid given to people who lost their jobs due to the work moving overseas. He also sought help from the local employment center and they suggested he begin taking English language courses. If he improved his English, he would have a better chance of finding a good job. In January of 2009, Jiverly signed up for English as a Second Language or ESL classes at the American Civic Association. His teacher said that he never really participated in the class and that he would get angry when she corrected his English, which is strange since that was the reason he was there in the first place. People said that Jiverly resented that people made fun of his poor English skills and it seemed like he might have taken the teacher's corrections as ridicule, something that would be in line with his paranoid nature. The teacher said that he only attended the class sporadically and stopped showing up at the beginning of March. On April 3rd, Jiverly had a 10 a.m. appointment at the employment center, but he was a no-show. Instead, he went to the American Civic Association 2 blocks away in his father's vehicle. He parked the car against the back door to the building to prevent anybody from escaping and then walked in the front door. He was described as wearing a bright green nylon jacket and a bulletproof vest, carrying a 9mm Beretta and a .45 caliber Beretta with extended magazines. He had a satchel with more ammunition over his shoulder and a hunting knife in his waistband. One of the pistols had a laser sight attached to it. There were 2 women in the reception area and he shot 60-year-old Maria Zobnu in the head, killing her, and then he turned the gun on 61-year-old Shirley DeLucia. He shot her in the abdomen and she pretended to be dead until the attacker left the reception area and then she dialed 911. She stayed on the phone until a SWAT team arrived and then continued feeding the police information from inside the building. Jiverly had gone from the reception area into the room where the class he had been in was taking place. In the classroom, Jiverly opened fire on every person in the room. Everyone who was in that room received a gunshot, and by the end of the attack, Jiverly had fired a total of 99 shots, 88 from the 9mm and 11 from the .45 caliber. The teacher and 11 students were killed by the gunshots. 72-year-old Roberta King was a substitute teacher as the regular teacher was on vacation. She was a grandmother of 17. The students were 54-year-old He Hong Zhang, an immigrant from China, 53-year-old Dolores Yeagle from the Philippines, 53-year-old Kayla Khalil from Iraq, 47-year-old Li Gua from China, 46-year-old Maria Sonia Bernard and 44-year-old Mark Henry Bernard from Haiti, 43-year-old Almir Olimpio Alves from Brazil, 39-year-old Lan Ho from Vietnam, 35-year-old Hong Shu Amy Mao Marsland from China, 26-year-old Parveen Ali from Pakistan, and 22-year-old Zhang Lin from China. One of the wounded was 42-year-old Long Huin, who was married to Lan Ho. They had immigrated to the U.S. 2 years prior, looking for a better life for themselves and their children. It seemed as though Jiverly was planning to engage in a gun battle with the authorities based on the amount of ammunition brought with him and having started to take hostages. But when an alarm in the building went off, he turned the gun on himself. The shooting only lasted 3 minutes, and police were just arriving on the scene as it ended. Officers would go on to report that they didn't hear any shooting when they approached the building. They weren't sure if the gunman was alone or if he was waiting to ambush them. When the SWAT team arrived, they pulled Shirley DeLucia from the reception area. They eventually moved in and pulled out the survivors. There were dozens of other people in other places in the building that made it out safely. Jiverly Wong was located in the classroom with a fatal self-inflicted gunshot wound. He was determined to have been the lone shooter. Days after the shooting, the television news station News 10 Now in Syracuse, New York, received a letter that had been put in the mail by Jiverly on the day of the shooting. The writing is hard to understand, but this is what it said. Date: March 18, 2009. Dear New 10 Now, I am Jiverly Wong shooting the people. The first, I want to say sorry. I know a little English. I hope you understand all of this. Of course, you need to know why I shooting. Because undercover cop gave me a lot of ass during 18 years. I got 7 years and 8 months delivery to grocery in the California. Came back to New York on the August 2007. Let talk about when I live in California. Such as, cop used 24 hours the technique of ultra-modern and camera for burn the chemical in my house. For switch the channel TV, for adjust the fan, for made me unbreathable, for made me vomit, for connect the music into my ear. Undercover cop usual coined some nasty was not true about me and spread a rumor to the receiver, and some people know me conduce toward many people prejudiced and selfish to me. Cop made me lost my job. Cop put me became poor. Let talk about when I lived at 28 Baker Street, 2nd floor, Johnson City, New York, 13790. It terrible when I live there, such as, cop wait until midnight when I off the light and went to the bed. Cop unlock my door and came in, take a sit in my room. Cop did it 13 time on the year 1994. On the 13 time, had 3 time touch me when I sleeping. 1 time stole $20 in my wallet. 1 time used electric gun shoot at the behind my neck. That time I did not know English. Please continue second page, thank you. From 1990 to 1995, New York undercover cop tried to get in a car accident with me. Such as when I driving on the highway and on the street, undercover cops suddenly brake the car, stop immediately at the front of my car. Cop did it 32 time like that during 1990 to 1995, but I never hit the car. Many time from 1990 to 1997 at the daytime, cop exploit unknown English and went to my house, knock the door for harass and domineer. Of course, during that time, cop coined something that was not true about me and spread a rumor nasty like the California cop. From August 2007 until now, cop gave me not too much ass. Only 1 time cop leave message in my voicemail and said, "Come back to your country." After 5 minutes, I send a text message to them. I said I will call the police, and they send it back to me. They said they are the police, dear. New 10 Now. Right now I still get unemployment benefit of the company Shopvac Endicott. New York State Department of Labor was cheat and unpaid from December 1st, 2008 to December 28th, 2008. I already claim weekly benefit from that date. Anyway, I cannot accept my poor life. Before I cut my poor life, I must oneself get a judge job for making impartial with undercover cop by at least 2 people with me go to return to the dust of earth. Already impartial now. Cop bring about this shooting, cop must responsible, and you have a nice day. Now, I don't want anybody to think I'm making fun of him for not knowing English well. I just wanted to read the letter exactly how it was written, so people can take from it their own interpretations. From my understanding, Jiverly believed that he was being harassed by a police officer in New York and another one in California. He starts by saying he got a lot of ass from an undercover cop, which I think is slang for getting harassed. What I think he goes on to explain is that the cop sprayed some sort of chemical in his apartment that made it hard to breathe. I also think he meant that the cop was using some sort of remote control to change the channels on his television and turn his fan on and off. Then that cop started spreading a rumor about him that wasn't true. He also said that the cop made him lose his job, but we know that's not true. His employer said that he just stopped showing up one day. Based on this letter, when he lived in New York prior to that, a different cop had been harassing him the same way. That cop would continually brake check him, trying to cause an accident. That cop had also started spreading a rumor about him. Near the end of his letter, he says that the state of New York had cheated him out of 4 weeks of unemployment pay. Then he said he couldn't accept his poor life and that he was going to end it while taking at least 2 people with him. Then he told the news station to have a nice day. I don't think it's a coincidence that Jiverly describes the same behavior by 2 different cops in California and New York. I think he was paranoid and his mind created those scenarios. Besides the cleaner at the apartment in California claiming FBI agents were looking for Jiverly, nobody else had ever seen any authorities harassing him. He lived with his parents for 2 years before the shooting, and his father said he had never had any police call or come to the house looking for him. He had never seen any of the harassment that Jiverly described. You might have noticed that the letter that he sent to News 10 Now was dated about 2 weeks before the shooting. His father said that around that time, Jiverly stopped watching the news, stopped eating, and rarely emerged from his bedroom. He was clearly suffering mentally and would go on to carry out what he had outlined in his letter. Now, this story is not a reason to hate immigrants in the U.S. Immigrants in total actually commit less violent crime per capita than natural-born Americans, both legal and illegal immigrants. And that's per capita, so population numbers aren't a factor. As a matter of fact, over the last few decades, as the number of immigrants in the U.S. has risen, the overall crime rate in the country has decreased. The American Immigration Council stated, quote, "Between 1980 and 2022, the immigrant share of the U.S. population more than doubled, from 6.2% to 13.9%, while the total crime rate dropped by 60.4% from 5,900 crimes per 100,000 people to 2,335 crimes per 100,000 people. Specifically, the violent crime rate fell by 34.5% and the property crime rate fell by 63.3%. A 2020 study by Ran Abramitsky from the National Bureau of Economic Research at Cambridge looked at the incarceration rate among immigrants for the last 150 years in the U.S., and in the past 50 years, both legal and illegal immigrants were 50 to 60% less likely to be incarcerated. And those crime rates that I previously mentioned showed that immigrants weren't committing crime and getting away with it. And cities with sanctuary policies have seen no rise in crime rates in the years since those policies were implemented. So before you use this single example as a reason to raise your fist and turn all of the victims in this story into criminals, just remember that the facts are not on your side if you choose to do that. Though the true motive for the shooting will never be known, it's clear that the gunman did not have an issue with immigrants. Though he mentioned reasons he was upset, he never explained why he chose to kill the people he had. His death means that the questions about the shooting will never be answered and will be left wondering. Was Jiverly Wong the subject of a cross-country plot to harass him by the cops, or was he suffering from some undiagnosed mental health issues that caused him to be paranoid? I believe it's the latter, but I can't be 100% sure. What I am sure of, though, is that he was a monster. Thanks for watching This Is Monsters. New episodes are uploaded twice a week on Mondays and Thursdays. There are occasional bonus episodes covering unsolved cases and criminal history. If you have a suggestion for a case you think I should cover, leave it in the comments. You can always follow the channel on Instagram at thisis_monsters and purchase merch at thisismonsters.com. Thanks so much, and be safe.